Danielle was a young woman who carried herself with quiet confidence. At first glance, most people saw her only as a waitress at an elegant restaurant in the heart of the city. The restaurant was one of those places where the tables were always dressed with white cloths, candles glowed softly in the evening, and classical music floated in the background. Guests came in wearing business suits and evening dresses, speaking in lowered voices as if the room itself expected elegance. Danielle moved between the tables with grace. She balanced trays effortlessly, greeted guests with a warm smile, and made sure every detail of their dining experience felt perfect. For her, this job was not just about carrying plates and writing down orders, it was about creating a comfortable moment for every person who walked in. Many of her co-workers admired how she managed to keep her calm even on the busiest nights when the kitchen was loud, the tables were full, and the demands never seemed to end. But what most people did not know was that Danielle's story stretched far beyond the walls of the restaurant. She had grown up in a modest neighborhood where opportunities were not always easy to find. From a young age, she had been curious about the world, its people, its cultures, and especially its languages. While her friends spent afternoons watching television, Danielle often sat at the public library with books in front of her, tracing new words with her finger, whispering them until they felt natural on her tongue. At first, she studied Spanish because she heard it spoken often around her community. She would practice with neighbors, asking them simple questions and laughing at her own mistakes. Later, she discovered French, German, and even bits of Italian. Each language opened a new window to a different way of thinking, and Danielle found joy in every new phrase she learned. It gave her a sense of freedom, a feeling that she was not limited to one corner of the world. Her teachers in school noticed her gift. One of them, a kind old professor, had once told her, "Danielle, you have the ear of a linguist. Don't stop learning. One day, this will open doors for you." She had carried those words like a small treasure in her heart. Even though life had taken her into the restaurant business for the time being, she never abandoned her passion. After late night shifts, when most of her co-workers went home to rest, Danielle often sat by her small desk with a cup of tea, reading books in foreign languages, or listening to recordings online to improve her pronunciation. Her co-workers knew she was smart, but few understood how deeply talented she really was. To them, she was simply the reliable waitress who could handle 3 tables at once without mixing up an order, who always remembered regular customers by name, and who could calm an upset guest with a gentle word. Danielle never bragged about her skills or her studies, she simply carried them quietly, like a secret garden she kept for herself. Still, life at the restaurant was not always easy. Working in such an upscale place meant dealing with many different kinds of people. Most guests treated her with kindness and respect, but now and then, someone would look at her uniform and assume she had no dreams beyond the dining hall. Danielle was used to these moments. She would smile politely, continue her work, and remind herself that her worth was not defined by anyone else's opinion. Her family was her biggest source of encouragement. Her mother often told her, "Danielle, the way you work hard now will shape your future. You are not just serving food, you are preparing yourself for something greater." Danielle believed those words. Every tray she carried and every order she wrote down felt like part of a bigger journey. She did not know exactly when her chance would come, but she trusted that one day, her hidden skills would shine in the right moment. That evening, the restaurant was particularly busy. The golden light of the chandeliers reflected off the polished glasses, and laughter filled the air as groups of diners enjoyed their meals. Danielle adjusted her apron, checked the notepad in her pocket, and prepared for another long night. She did not mind the work, in fact, she often found comfort in the rhythm of it. The restaurant was a stage, and she played her role with quiet strength. But behind her calm expression was a sharp and curious mind. Every time she passed a table where people spoke in a language she recognized, her ears would pick up the words almost without effort. She would smile inwardly, understanding entire conversations without anyone realizing it. Sometimes, when tourists struggled to explain themselves, she would gently step in with a phrase or two in their own language. Their faces lit up with surprise and gratitude, and Danielle would walk away feeling secretly proud. She knew that working as a waitress was not her final destination. Her dreams were larger than the four walls of the restaurant. She hoped to one day work as a translator, or perhaps a language teacher, sharing her love of words with others. But for now, this job helped her pay the bills, support her family, and keep herself steady as she prepared for a brighter future. The regular staff respected her, though some guests barely noticed her beyond the food she placed on their tables. That did not bother Danielle much. She had learned that people reveal themselves not by what they say, but by how they treat others. In her heart, she carried patience, knowing that every challenge in life was an opportunity in disguise. On that particular night, as the clock ticked toward the dinner rush, Danielle had no idea that something unusual was about to happen. She had no way of knowing that her love of languages, the very passion she kept quietly to herself, was about to be revealed in the most unexpected way. What began as just another evening of serving food and pouring drinks would soon become a story that everyone in the restaurant would remember. The city outside buzzed with traffic, neon lights glowed on the sidewalks, and the smell of food drifted through the doors each time they opened. Inside, Danielle tied her hair back neatly, picked up her tray, and walked toward a table reserved for an important group of corporate guests. To her, it was simply another assignment, another chance to do her work well. But fate had arranged something different. This table would not only test her patience, it would bring her face to face with a moment that would change how others saw her, and perhaps how she saw herself. The evening was already busy when Danielle noticed a special reservation marked on the list. A group of high-level business leaders had booked one of the largest tables near the center of the restaurant. The staff had spent extra time preparing the space, arranging the glasses with precision, and placing the best cutlery on the polished wooden table. It was clear that this group was important, not only because of their status but also because of the attention the restaurant manager gave to every detail. Danielle, as always, was chosen to serve the table. She had earned a reputation among her co-workers for handling difficult or demanding guests with ease. No matter how busy or stressful things became, she remained calm, smiling, and professional. She didn't let impatience show, and she had a natural way of making people feel comfortable. As the group arrived, Danielle greeted them warmly. They were dressed in elegant suits, their shoes polished, and their conversation filled with laughter. Among them was the CEO, a tall man with sharp features and a commanding presence. He walked with the air of someone used to being admired, his head slightly raised as though the room itself was too small for him. Danielle welcomed them, offered drinks, and began to take their orders. Most of the group treated her politely, though with the distant tone of people used to being served. She was used to that and didn't take it personally. But she noticed the CEO's eyes on her longer than necessary. His gaze wasn't warm, it carried a mix of curiosity and something else she couldn't quite place. At first, his comments seemed casual. He joked about how long the menu was and asked if she memorized everything. Danielle answered politely, explaining a few dishes and making light conversation as she usually did. But as the evening went on, his tone shifted. His words carried a sharper edge, though he masked them with humor that made the others laugh. "You must get tired of repeating the same lines about food every night," he said, smirking. "Do you ever dream of something else, or is this it for you?" Danielle kept her smile steady. She had learned not to let such remarks disturb her. "I enjoy my work," she replied calmly. "Every evening brings different people and different experiences." Her answer made some of the executives nod with appreciation, but the CEO leaned back in his chair with a half-smile that seemed to suggest he didn't believe her. Danielle carried on with her duties, bringing their drinks and returning with appetizers. But each time she came near the table, the CEO added another remark, each one slightly more pointed than the last. He spoke as though he wanted to show the others how clever he was, turning their dinner into a stage for his wit. "Serving food must be easy," he said loudly enough for the group to hear. "I suppose you don't need much training for that, right?" Some of his colleagues chuckled softly, though a few looked uncomfortable. Danielle answered politely, saying, "Every job has its challenges. It's about patience, focus, and kindness." Her calm tone made a few people at the table exchange looks, but the CEO seemed amused. He continued as if he was waiting for her to slip, to lose her calm, or to react in a way that would give him control of the moment. Danielle, however, refused to let his words shape her mood. She had faced similar moments before, though never quite so direct. Still, she reminded herself of her mother's advice: never let someone else decide your worth. Stay calm, and your dignity will speak louder than their words. As the evening moved forward, the CEO seemed determined to test her. When Danielle returned to refill their glasses, he leaned forward and asked, "Tell me something. Do you think you're smarter than you look?" The question hung in the air, and for a moment, the table grew quiet. Danielle kept her composure and answered gently, "I believe everyone is more than they appear. We all carry skills people cannot always see." Her words made a few people nod thoughtfully, but the CEO laughed. "That's a nice line," he said, "but talk is easy." Danielle continued serving, her movements steady and graceful. Yet she could feel the challenge building, like a storm slowly gathering. The CEO wasn't finished, and she sensed he was preparing something more direct. The executives around him seemed divided. Some laughed at his remarks, eager to stay in his favor. Others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, clearly uneasy with the way he singled her out. Danielle noticed it all but said nothing. She knew that true strength often showed in silence. Still, inside, she felt a quiet determination rising. She did not want to be anyone's target for jokes, but she also knew that sometimes life gave you moments where you could prove yourself without raising your voice or lowering your grace. She didn't know how it would come, but she felt the evening was leading her towards such a moment. The CEO leaned back once more, his glass in hand, and gave her a look that mixed amusement with challenge. "You seem confident for a waitress," he said. "Let's see just how sharp you really are." The others at the table turned their eyes toward Danielle. It was as though the room itself had paused, waiting for what he would say next. Danielle stood with her tray in hand, her posture tall, her expression calm, but inside she could feel the weight of the moment pressing on her. The challenge had been spoken, but its full shape had not yet revealed itself. She didn't know exactly what he was planning, but she was ready. She had spent her whole life preparing in ways that no one in that room could see. The languages she studied, the words she carried, the discipline she practiced, all of it had built a strength within her. And soon, without warning, that strength would be tested in front of them all. The laughter at the table softened, replaced by a quiet tension. Danielle felt it in the air, like the hush before a curtain rises in a theater. The CEO smiled again, but this time, it was different, more deliberate, more pointed. He had chosen her as the center of his game, but he had no idea that the game would not end as he expected. The rising challenge was no longer just about serving food, it was about dignity, respect, and the hidden brilliance that Danielle carried inside her. And as she moved to clear the plates and prepare for the next course, she felt the stage being set for a moment that would change everything. The table had grown lively with chatter, but beneath the laughter was an air of expectation. The CEO had been testing Danielle with words all evening, and now he seemed ready to push further. He leaned forward, his glass catching the glow of the chandelier above, and gave her a look that carried challenge. "Let's try something different," he said, his voice louder than before so that even nearby tables could overhear. "You say everyone has hidden skills. Well then, show us one of yours." The other executives looked at him with curiosity. A few of them shifted in their seats, sensing what he was doing. Danielle stood quietly, her tray balanced neatly in her hand. She did not flinch. She waited, calm as ever, for him to continue. With a smirk, the CEO reached into his briefcase, which he had kept near his chair. From it, he pulled out a document, its pages marked with neat printed text. He placed it on the table and tapped it with his finger. "This," he said, "is written in German. I'm sure none of us here can read it. But you," he looked at Danielle directly, "if you're so confident, then translate it for us. Right here, right now." The challenge landed heavily on the table. A few of the executives chuckled, expecting the moment to end quickly with Danielle's confusion. Others looked uncertain, sensing it might not play out as the CEO imagined. Danielle's eyes rested on the paper. For a moment, the room seemed to slow down. She could hear the faint notes of music playing softly in the background, the clink of silverware at other tables, and the quiet hush that had fallen over the group before her. Inside, she felt no fear. Instead, a calm strength rose within her. She stepped forward gently, set her tray down on a nearby side table, and picked up the document. Her fingers brushed the paper as she glanced over the text. The words, neatly printed in German, were clear to her eyes. She began to read aloud. Her voice was steady, smooth, and confident. She spoke the German words with correct pronunciation, each syllable flowing naturally as though the language belonged to her. The executives at the table froze, their eyes widening in surprise. The CEO's smile wavered, the amusement on his face replaced by a flicker of disbelief. As Danielle finished the passage, she paused only for a second before speaking again. This time, she translated the entire text into perfect English. Her words were fluent, clear, and meaningful. There was no hesitation, no stumbling, only the grace of someone who truly understood what she was saying. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not empty, it was filled with awe. The executives stared at her as though they were seeing her for the first time. A few of them exchanged amazed glances, while one leaned forward, whispering, "Incredible." Danielle placed the document back on the table with gentle hands, then straightened her posture. She did not gloat or smile triumphantly. She simply stood with the same calm dignity she had carried all night. The CEO, however, was frozen. His eyes darted to the paper, then back to Danielle, as if searching for some explanation. His confident smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression of shock. For the first time that evening, he had no clever words. His silence spoke louder than anything else. One of the executives broke into a small clap, which quickly grew into applause around the table. Their admiration was genuine. They praised Danielle for her talent, asking how she had learned to speak German so fluently. Their tone was no longer distant or dismissive, it was filled with respect. Danielle answered politely, her voice calm. She explained that she had studied languages for years, learning on her own and practicing whenever she could. She spoke of her love for understanding different cultures and her belief that language was a bridge between people. The executives listened with interest, nodding and smiling. Their respect for her grew with every word. A few even asked what other languages she knew, eager to learn more about the woman they had overlooked moments earlier. Meanwhile, the CEO remained silent, his face tense. His earlier attempt to embarrass her had backfired completely, turning into a moment that highlighted his arrogance and Danielle's brilliance. The laughter that once supported him now belonged to her, though Danielle herself did not laugh. She remained humble, carrying herself with grace. As she stepped back to continue her work, she noticed how the atmosphere at the table had shifted. The executives now looked at her with genuine admiration, their eyes following her with respect. Even the staff members nearby, who had overheard what had happened, watched her with pride. The moment had changed everything. What began as an attempt to belittle her had become a stage for her hidden strength to shine. Danielle did not plan it, but life had presented her with an opportunity, and she had risen to it with calm confidence. As the evening went on, the executives treated her differently. They asked her name, thanked her with sincerity, and some even spoke kindly about her future. The CEO, however, spoke less and less, his earlier loudness replaced by an uneasy quiet. His attempt to mock her had instead exposed his own lack of awareness. Danielle finished her shift with the same care she always showed. She refilled glasses, delivered dishes, and ensured her guests were comfortable. Yet beneath her steady rhythm was the knowledge that something extraordinary had taken place. She had not only defended her dignity, she had also shown everyone present that true intelligence does not need loud words or grand titles. It shines naturally, quietly, and unmistakably when the right moment arrives. The executives left the restaurant that night with a story they would not forget. Some of them looked back at Danielle before stepping out, offering her smiles that carried both admiration and respect. The CEO, on the other hand, walked out without meeting her eyes, his steps heavier than when he arrived. And as Danielle cleared the table after they had gone, she felt no bitterness. Instead, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had faced a challenge meant to belittle her, and she had turned it into a moment of triumph without raising her voice, without anger, only with grace, patience, and the knowledge she had carried all along. The applause at the table slowly faded, but the energy it left behind still filled the air. Danielle, with her calm smile, picked up her tray again and quietly returned to her work. She did not pause to enjoy the moment too long, nor did she bask in the surprise she had created. To her, it was simply another chance to live with dignity and show that kindness and knowledge can speak louder than any challenge. But the people at the table could not forget what they had seen. The executives, who had at first treated her like just another face in the restaurant, now studied her with a new kind of attention. Their eyes followed her as she moved gracefully around the room, as if they were seeing her in a new light. One of them leaned toward the CEO with a small smile. "She's remarkable," he said softly, but loud enough that the others heard. A few nodded in agreement. The CEO forced a thin smile but said nothing. The rest of the dinner carried on, but the balance had shifted. Earlier in the evening, the CEO had controlled the conversation, filling the room with his remarks and laughter. Now he spoke less, his voice quieter, while the others at the table directed more of their comments toward Danielle whenever she came by. They asked her thoughtful questions about her love for languages, about how she managed to learn them while working long hours, and even about what she hoped to do in the future. Danielle answered gently, always humble. She spoke of her childhood trips to the library, of her late nights practicing words in front of the mirror, and of her dream to one day become a professional translator or language teacher. Her answers were simple, but they carried depth. Each word reflected her sincerity and her quiet determination. The executives listened closely, some nodding with admiration. A few even shared their own experiences about learning languages when traveling for work, and how difficult it had been for them. "It's not easy," one admitted, "and yet you speak as if it's natural. That's real dedication." Danielle thanked them politely, always careful not to turn the evening into her stage. She was there to serve, and she continued her duties with the same care she always gave. Yet inside, she could feel the warmth of their respect. It gave her strength, a gentle reminder that her hard work had not been in vain. The CEO, however, grew quieter as the evening continued. His confident posture slouched slightly, and his attempts at jokes no longer carried the same charm. Whenever Danielle approached the table, he kept his eyes down or busied himself with his glass. The colleagues who once laughed at his remarks now spoke more with her than with him, leaving him in the background of the very dinner he had expected to dominate. The restaurant staff had also noticed what had happened. Danielle's co-workers glanced at her with pride, exchanging small smiles when she passed by. For them, she had always been the strong, graceful one, but now the guests themselves had witnessed it. They admired how she had handled the moment, not with loud words or pride, but with calm strength that no one could ignore. By the time dessert was served, the atmosphere at the table had transformed completely. The executives were relaxed, their earlier stiffness replaced by genuine enjoyment. They laughed, shared stories, and even invited Danielle to recommend her favorite dishes from the menu. She suggested a few with a warm smile, and they gladly followed her advice. When the bill finally arrived, one of the executives, not the CEO, requested to handle it personally. He left a generous tip for Danielle, far beyond what was usual. "For your excellent service," he said kindly, "and for reminding us that brilliance can appear where you least expect it." Danielle accepted the gesture with gratitude, bowing her head slightly. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm glad you enjoyed your evening." As they stood to leave, several of the executives shook her hand, something that almost never happened between guests and waitstaff in such a formal restaurant. Their smiles were warm and genuine. One of them even said, "If you ever pursue a career outside this place, I'd be happy to hear from you." He handed her a business card, tucking it discreetly into her palm before walking away. The CEO walked out last. His steps were heavy, his face unreadable. He said nothing to Danielle, not even a polite thank you. For him, the evening had not gone as planned. He had entered the restaurant expecting to impress his colleagues and perhaps entertain them at someone else's expense. Instead, he had been humbled, silently and gracefully, by the very person he tried to ridicule. Danielle did not dwell on his silence. Instead, she focused on the smiles of the others and the feeling of peace within her heart. She had not argued, she had not raised her voice, and yet she had won the moment with nothing more than knowledge and composure. That, to her, was enough. After the guests left, the restaurant slowly quieted. The staff began cleaning up, folding napkins, and stacking chairs. Danielle gathered the empty glasses and plates from the table, her movements steady as always. Yet inside, she carried a sense of fulfillment she had never felt before. One of her co-workers approached her with a grin. "Danielle," he whispered, "that was amazing. I've never seen anyone handle something like that so perfectly." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "I only did what I always do," she said modestly. "I just stayed calm." But her co-worker shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "You showed them who you are. And now, they'll never forget it." Danielle smiled at his words but did not let pride take over her heart. She knew that moments like this were not about showing off, they were about standing firm in dignity. She finished her tasks for the night, tied up her apron, and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city streets were alive with movement, cars rushing past, lights glowing in tall buildings, and people walking quickly toward their destinations. Danielle walked home with a lighter step than usual, the memory of the evening replaying in her mind. She thought of the applause, the kind words, and the look of shock on the CEO's face. More than anything, she thought of how her secret love for languages, something she had nurtured quietly for years, had finally stepped into the light. That night, she sat at her small desk as she often did, a cup of tea beside her and a language book open in front of her. But this time, she read with a deeper sense of purpose. The world had just shown her that her skills were not hidden forever, that in the right moment, they could change not only how others saw her but how she saw herself. The night of the dinner stayed in Danielle's memory long after the tables had been cleared and the lights of the restaurant had dimmed. At first, she thought it was only one unusual evening, a moment that began with small remarks and ended with surprise and applause. But as the days went by, she realized it had become something more. Her co-workers continued to talk about it in the staff room. "Do you remember when Danielle read German like it was nothing?" one would say, shaking his head in amazement. The whole table was silent. Another would laugh softly and add, "And the look on that CEO's face, I'll never forget it." Danielle always smiled when they mentioned it, but she tried not to let the story become larger than her work. For her, it had not been about showing off. It had been about dignity, about responding with calm strength when someone tried to test her. Still, she could not deny that the experience had changed something inside her. For years, she had studied languages quietly, often wondering if her efforts mattered. She had questioned whether all those late nights at the library or all the hours listening to recordings would ever lead anywhere. But now she had proof. Her skills were real, valuable, and visible. That one moment had shown her and everyone else that she carried something powerful within her. The business card she had received that night rested neatly in her wallet. She had not yet decided whether to call the man who gave it to her, but the thought stayed in her mind. It was a reminder that opportunities sometimes appeared in unexpected places, and that her future might not always remain inside the walls of the restaurant. As weeks turned into months, Danielle continued her routine. She served tables, smiled at guests, and worked with her usual grace. But there was a new light in her eyes, a quiet confidence that others began to notice. Regular customers, who had always liked her, now seemed even more drawn to her warmth. They spoke to her longer, asked about her life, and listened when she shared small pieces of her story. Some of them even brought their friends, saying, "You have to meet Danielle, she's the waitress who speaks languages like a scholar." At first, she blushed at the attention, but slowly she realized that people were not laughing at her. They were admiring her, respecting her, and celebrating her gift. Her family, too, felt proud when she shared the story. Her mother's eyes filled with tears when Danielle explained what had happened. "I always told you," her mother whispered, holding her hands tightly, "your hard work would not go unnoticed. This is only the beginning." Those words gave Danielle hope. She began to set aside more time for her studies, practicing not only German but also French and Spanish. She even started learning new languages she had once only admired from afar, like Japanese and Portuguese. To her, every new word was a door opening into a new world. The restaurant continued to be her workplace, but her dreams grew larger. Sometimes, as she wiped down tables late at night, she imagined herself standing in front of a classroom, teaching students the beauty of language. Other times, she pictured herself at conferences, translating important speeches between world leaders. Each vision felt closer now, no longer a distant fantasy but a possibility within reach. The memory of the CEO also remained, though Danielle did not hold any anger toward him. Instead, she felt almost grateful. His challenge had been unfair, but without it, she might never have shown her skill so openly. In a way, his attempt to belittle her had become the very moment that revealed her brilliance. She reflected often on that truth. Life, she realized, sometimes brings trials not to weaken us, but to reveal the strength we already have. Challenges can feel uncomfortable, even unfair, but they can also become the stage where hidden talents shine. That lesson stayed with her, shaping how she viewed every new day. As time went on, the story of that night spread quietly beyond the restaurant. Some of the executives who had been there told others about the brilliant waitress who spoke perfect German. A few even returned to the restaurant, not only for the food but to greet Danielle again. Each time, they treated her with genuine respect, remembering the moment when she had surprised them all. One evening, several months later, one of the executives approached her after dinner. "Danielle," he said kindly, "I remember you from that night. Have you thought about pursuing translation more seriously? If you're interested, I could connect you with someone in that field." The offer made Danielle's heart race. She smiled, thanked him, and promised to think about it. She didn't rush, because she wanted to be sure she was ready. But she knew that doors were opening, slowly and steadily, and all she had to do was step through them when the time was right. At the same time, she never let go of her humility. Even with the praise and opportunities, Danielle remained grounded. She continued to treat every guest with kindness, no matter who they were. To her, respect was not something reserved for those in suits or those with titles, it was something everyone deserved. Her co-workers often asked her how she stayed so calm, even under pressure. She would smile and say, "Because anger only takes energy away. But patience gives you strength." That simple truth, lived out every day, inspired those around her. The legacy of that one evening was not only in Danielle's personal growth, but also in the way it changed those who witnessed it. The executives who had laughed along with the CEO learned an important lesson: never underestimate someone based on their job, their appearance, or their background. Intelligence and grace can appear in any form, at any table, and in any person. The CEO himself never returned to the restaurant. Perhaps the memory was too uncomfortable, or perhaps he wished to forget the night he had been silenced not by argument, but by simple truth. Yet, even his absence told a story. His silence became part of the legacy, too, a reminder that arrogance can crumble in the face of quiet strength. For Danielle, the reflection of that night became a guide for her future. She learned to believe more deeply in herself, to trust the hours she had spent learning, and to recognize that her dreams were not out of reach. She also learned that true power lies not in titles or wealth, but in character, patience, and the willingness to keep learning. Years later, when she finally stepped into a new career, whether as a translator, a teacher, or in another path, she carried that lesson with her. And those who remembered the story carried it too. Because sometimes, the most powerful stories are not told on stages or in books, they happen quietly, in the middle of ordinary places, like a restaurant on a busy evening. They happen when someone tries to test another, and instead of falling, that person rises higher than anyone expected. Danielle's story was one of those. And long after the plates were cleared and the lights turned off, it remained alive in her heart, in the memory of those who witnessed it, and in the lives of those who learned from it.